Night had blanketed the New Mexico desert in a velvety blanket of darkness. The air was dry, heavy with the smell of hot asphalt cooling after the scorching sun. Keanu Reeves held the steering wheel of his old '67 Chevy Impala, lost in the rhythm of the road. Music was playing softly from the speakers, and Keanu was mindlessly tapping his fingers on the steering wheel in time to the music. But today, even the music couldn't distract him from his heavy thoughts. An unpleasant feeling of emptiness burned in his chest, anxious, pressing, sticky. Keanu was driving to forget, to drown out the pain of loss. Another person who was important to him was gone. He didn't even have time to say goodbye. Keanu gripped the steering wheel tighter. He was used to being alone, but sometimes it became too loud. Outside, beyond the window, the desert was lifeless. Here and there, along the road, a few dried-up yucca bushes stood out, their long leaves like ruffled feathers. A huge moon hung over the horizon, bathing the landscape in a cold, silvery light. A few miles away, he was about to pull into an abandoned gas station to get some coffee and rest for a bit. Keanu could already see the faint glow of a lone neon sign ahead when he noticed something on the road ahead. At first, he thought it was just a bag or a piece of cardboard that the wind had blown onto the highway. But as he got closer, Keanu began to make out a shape. It was a silhouette, a human silhouette. Reflexively, he took his foot off the gas and then slammed on the brakes. The tires screeched on the asphalt, and the car stopped abruptly just a few meters from the figure. Keanu's heart pounded. He sat behind the wheel for a few seconds, peering into the darkness of the night. The moonlight helped him see more details. It was a child, a boy, maybe 8 or 9 years old. He was standing all alone, in the middle of an empty road, looking straight at Keanu. He was wearing a thin t-shirt, too light for the cold desert night. His hair was dark, slightly tousled. He was barefoot, his feet covered in dust and dirt. Keanu froze. What the hell? The boy didn't move. He just stared at the car, like he was expecting something. Keanu looked around. No houses, no cars, no people. Just the desert and the road. He couldn't just show up here. Keanu's instincts told him to be careful. He'd heard stories about highway booby traps where a helpless child would wander out onto the road, and when someone stopped, bandits would jump out of the darkness and rob the driver. But this boy didn't look like bandit bait. He looked lost. Keanu took a deep breath, pocketed his keys, pulled a small flashlight out of the glove compartment, checked that his phone was in the back pocket of his jeans, and carefully opened the door. Cold air hit his face. "Hey man, are you okay?" Keanu's voice was soft but confident. The boy didn't answer right away. He just looked at him, his head slightly tilted, as if studying him. Keanu Reeves was standing by his car, and in front of him, in the moonlight, stood the boy, alone. His bare feet touched the cold asphalt, but he wasn't shaking. Only his eyes, dark, deep, full of something Keanu couldn't immediately understand, looked straight at him. Then, after a long pause, he said quietly, "I was waiting for you." These words made Keanu freeze. He involuntarily clutched the flashlight in his hand. What did this mean? Waiting? Why? Was it his imagination? Or was there something strange in the boy's voice? Not fear, not a plea for help, more like confidence, as if he knew Keanu would stop. "Are you alone? Where are your parents?" Keanu slowly moved forward, but stopped a few steps away. He didn't want to scare the boy. He blinked slowly, then answered dully, "Mom's in the house, but she won't wake up." Keanu's stomach clenched with a bad feeling. Won't wake up? He looked around again. Emptiness. No cars, no buildings. Just a black strip of highway disappearing into the night, and the occasional silhouette of a cactus frozen in the silent darkness. "Where is your home?" Keanu's voice sounded calm, but inside everything was tense. The boy was silent, then raised his hand and pointed to the desert beyond the road. Keanu followed his gaze. In the distance, almost merging with the horizon, the dark silhouette of a small building. It was a lonely, gloomy house with no light in the windows. Keanu felt something chilling his spine inside. He looked at the boy again. "Have you been here long?" "Yes." "Are you cold? Do you want to get in the car?" The boy thought about it. For a moment, Keanu felt a strange pause, as if the child was weighing something in his head. Then he nodded briefly. Okay, but can I help Mom first? Show me the house. They walked across the hard, dry ground until Keanu came to a house. It was an old building, one of those cheap mobile homes that often line the back roads. The paint was peeling. The door was hanging by one hinge. It was obvious that no one had lived there for a long time, but someone had been inside. A faint light was coming from the window, as if an old kerosene lamp had been left inside. Keanu approached the door carefully and pushed it. It creaked open. There was a smell of dust and something else inside, something metallic, sour. The boy walked past it, heading for the bed in the corner of the room. A woman lay there, motionless. Her face was pale, her breathing almost inaudible. An empty bottle of sleeping pills lay nearby. Keanu stepped closer. She was barely alive. He knelt down next to the bed and quickly checked her pulse. It was very weak. Hey, can you hear me? Keanu shook her shoulder lightly, but the woman did not react. The boy looked at him, calmly and without panic. Keanu quickly took out his phone and dialed 911. I need an ambulance. The woman took an overdose of sleeping pills. Pulse is weak. The address is... Shit. I'm on Route 285, near the old Silver Stop. The team has already left. Stay with the patient. Keanu put the phone away and looked at the boy. You're a good boy. If it weren't for you, she might not have been saved. The boy didn't answer. He just looked at his mother and then back at Keanu. I knew you'd stop. Keanu is left waiting for the ambulance, trying to figure out how the boy ended up alone on the road and why he was so sure that Keanu would help. But the truth may be even stranger than he thought. The silence inside the house seemed deeper and heavier than the emptiness of the night outside. Keanu sat on the edge of the old, sagging mattress, feeling the faint warmth of the woman's body. Her breathing was shallow, as if on the edge between sleep and something worse. She had taken too many pills. Keanu knew that look, empty, distant, frozen somewhere between pain and the utter loss of hope. He had seen eyes like that on people who were trying to disappear. He ran his hand slowly over his face, pushing down the memories that came flooding back. No, this was not the time for the past. He looked at the boy again. His name was Tommy. He was sitting on the floor, his legs tucked up to his chest, looking at Keanu as if he already knew what he was going to say. How long was she like that? Keanu asked softly. The boy shrugged. All day. I knew she wouldn't wake up, so I waited for you. Those words made Keanu tense up again. Why do you think I should have come? Tommy shook his head slightly, as if trying to find the right words. Mom said that if things ever got really bad, someone good would come along. Someone who could help. Someone good. Keanu stared at the boy, feeling something strange rise up inside him. It wasn't fear or anxiety, more like a sense of unreality. But you didn't know it would be me? Tommy cocked his head to the side a little, as if he were thinking. No, but when I saw the car, I understood. Keanu didn't know what to say to that. It was all too strange, too personal. He glanced at the woman, her chest still rising and falling slightly. The ambulance was due any minute. Keanu couldn't just sit there. Where's your dad? He asked. Tommy blinked slowly, then said, he left. A long time ago. Mom says he was a good man, but sad. He was waiting for someone too, but they never came. Keanu felt an icy prick in his chest. It was a story he knew all too well. Memories flashed before his eyes. People long lost. People who had left without ever finding a reason to stay. He closed his eyes, clenching his jaw. No, this was not the time for this. When he looked at the boy again, there was something new in his gaze. Not just sympathy, but understanding. Were you afraid that Mom wouldn't wake up? Tommy looked at him straight. No, I knew you'd save her. The ghostly wail of sirens could be heard in the distance. Keanu stood up and walked to the door. In the distance, blue and red lights pierced the desert darkness. The ambulance was already close. He turned to Tommy, but the boy was already looking at his mother, as if saying goodbye to this moment. Mom will stay alive. What would happen to him? Keanu didn't know, but he felt he couldn't just leave. Not this time. Keanu stood on the threshold of the dilapidated house, looking at the flashing red and blue lights of the ambulance cutting through the night darkness. The emergency van skidded to a halt at the edge of the dirt road, and immediately after, two paramedics jumped out, a man in a light blue jacket and a woman with a ponytail of dark hair. Keanu stepped back to let them in. "Where is the patient?" the woman asked briefly. "Over there, on the bed." Keanu nodded towards the room. The paramedics quickly approached the woman. The man leaned over, taking out a small flashlight and checking her pupillary response. Pulse is weak but stable. Possible benzodiazepine overdose. The woman was already connecting the four, her fingers moving clearly and confidently. "Are you related to her?" she asked, glancing at Keanu. "No, I was just passing by." He felt Tommy stand silently beside him, a small, warm hand touching his fingers. The gesture, quiet but filled with trust, struck Keanu right in the heart. The woman noticed the boy. "Are you her son?" she asked more softly. Tommy nodded. The paramedics exchanged glances. "We're taking her to St. David's Hospital in Santa Fe. She's in critical but stable condition. Can one of her relatives go with her?" Keanu asked, already knowing the answer. If the boy doesn't have a guardian in place, he'll have to be turned over to social services. Keanu clenched his fists and looked at Tommy again. The boy didn't look scared, but there was understanding in his eyes. Like he already knew what was coming. Like he'd been through this before. The paramedics carefully lifted the woman onto the stretcher, covered her with a thin, thermal blanket, and carried her out to the ambulance. Keanu and Tommy followed, feeling the cold night air creeping under their clothes. The paramedics quickly secured the stretcher inside the van, checked the equipment. Before closing the doors, the paramedic looked at Keanu again. "Are you his friend?" Keanu met her gaze. "No." She nodded. "Then they'll take him to the shelter. I'll call the social security officer. He'll be here in about 20 minutes. She said it evenly, without emotion, but there was a glimmer of sympathy in her eyes. Keanu watched as the ambulance doors slammed shut and the car, siren blaring, disappeared around the bend in the highway. That was it. She was gone. Tommy was still standing there, quiet, small, but surprisingly calm. He looked at Keanu. "Are you leaving?" The question was simple, but weighty. Keanu felt the weight of the choice. He looked at Tommy, at this strange boy, standing barefoot in the middle of the desert, waiting for him. To the one who wasn't afraid, because for some reason he knew that Keanu would help, he remembered the words, "I knew you would save her. I was waiting for you." Was it a coincidence? Or fate? Keanu took a deep breath. He couldn't just leave. He crouched down to be level with the boy. "I'll stay, Tommy." The boy nodded, and for the first time a small smile flickered across his face. Keanu didn't know what would happen next, but he felt he was doing the right thing. The desert night was silent, almost surreal. The warmth had gone with the sun, leaving behind a piercing cold that permeated the air, the earth, even the bones. Keanu stood next to Tommy, looking down the dusty road where the red and blue lights of the ambulance had disappeared. Tommy was quiet, but Keanu could feel something changing inside the boy. "Are you really staying?" Tommy asked, raising his head. "Yes," Keanu answered. "Even if you have to drive me?" The question caught Keanu off guard. He already knew that the boy would be taken away by social services if he simply left him here. That couldn't happen. The police could arrive at any minute, but now they still had a moment that could change everything. Keanu sighed. "If you want, we can leave." Tommy looked at him for a long time, as if weighing his words. Then he nodded. "Then let's go." And without saying another word, he took Keanu's hand and walked towards the car. The black Ford Mustang pulled slowly out onto the empty highway. Headlights cut through the darkness, illuminating the broken asphalt. Tommy sat in the passenger seat, buckled in. He didn't ask questions, didn't say a word, just looked at the stars that stretched across the sky like fireflies in the inky void. Keanu held the wheel, feeling the engine rumble under the hood and the wheels glide smoothly along the road. This was his choice. He could go in any direction, choose any city, any road. But he felt that this road was important. After a couple of minutes, Tommy's voice broke the silence. "Where are we going?" Keanu thought. "Somewhere better." Tommy looked at him. "You were lonely, right? Before this?" Keanu's grip tightened on the steering wheel. Those simple words hit Keanu harder than he expected. He felt a lump in his throat, but he said nothing. He just nodded. The Mustang continued to drive down the empty highway, taking them somewhere far away, to a new life. Somewhere where everything could start over. The dark sky began to change. Somewhere far beyond the horizon, a faint streak of golden light was breaking through the endless darkness. Keanu felt it first, not saw it, but felt it, as if the air had changed, as if the night no longer held him in its cold fingers. He glanced at Tommy out of the corner of his eye. The boy had fallen asleep, his head lolling slightly to the side, his cheek pressed against the old leather upholstery of the seat. He no longer looked wary or afraid. Keanu knew this dream, deep, heavy, the kind that only comes after long days of anxiety and loneliness. He knew this dream because he had slept like this many times. The road brought them to a small town, one of those lost in the vast expanses of New Mexico. An old sign with peeling paint stood on the side of the road. "Welcome to Esperanza." Keanu chuckled briefly. Esperanza. Hope. Was fate playing tricks on him again? The city was just waking up. The gas station lights were flashing. An older man in a cowboy hat was washing the windows of his small store, and a woman in a plaid shirt was pushing a display of baked goods out the door of a roadside diner. Ordinary people. Ordinary life. Keanu pulled into the diner and turned off the engine. For a second, he just sat in silence, listening to the engine cool. Then he looked back at Tommy. The boy was still asleep, his breathing even and calm. For the first time in a long time, Keanu felt like he had done the right thing. He didn't know what was coming next, but for the first time in a long time, it didn't scare him. Keanu looked at Tommy and knew. This kid wasn't an accident. This meeting wasn't just a coincidence. For the first time in a long time, he felt like his presence in someone's life mattered. Suddenly Tommy stirred, slowly opening his eyes and blinking, as if he still wasn't fully aware of where he was. "Are you okay?" Keanu asked quietly. The boy yawned, straightened up and looked around. Then he nodded. "You didn't leave?" Keanu smiled a little. "I promised." Tommy looked out the window, watching the busy street. "Where are we going now?" The question made Keanu think. Before, he always moved without a goal, just drove wherever his eyes took him. But now he had a choice. And, surprisingly, he already knew the answer. He looked at Tommy. "I heard there is an orphanage in this city. Small but good." Tommy immediately tensed, his fingers clenching into fists. "You want to send me there?" There was no anger in his voice, only fear. Fear of being unwanted. "No, Tommy. I want to see if I can be your guardian while Mommy is in the hospital." The boy froze. A silence hung between them, filled with something more than words. Tommy looked at Keanu as if he were seeing him for the first time. "Is that what you really want?" Keanu nodded. "Yes." The boy blinked, his lips twitching. He took a deep breath and said quietly but firmly, "Then I agree too." In that moment, Keanu realized, sometimes the road doesn't just take you somewhere. Sometimes it takes you to where you're needed most. Afterwards, Keanu and Tommy arrived at the hospital room. The air in the room was filled with the smell of sterility, a faint scent of antiseptic, clean sheets, and something that is always present in hospitals, something elusive. The dim light of the morning sun filtered through the white blinds, casting streaks on the wall. Keanu was sitting in a chair by the bed. Tommy was on the edge of the couch, his legs swinging quietly, as if he was afraid that if he moved too quickly, everything would disappear. A woman was lying on the bed. Her face was still pale, but her breathing was even. She looked tired and exhausted. Keanu saw the slightest movement of her fingers. The woman shuddered, her eyelids fluttering as if she were fighting off a heavy sleep. Then a deep breath. Another. And slowly, very slowly, she opened her eyes. There was something strange about that moment. It was as if Keanu was watching the sunrise for the first time, as if something important had clicked into place. The woman blinked, looked around the room, then looked at Keanu. "Where am I?" Her voice was hoarse, weak, but she spoke. Tommy leaned forward, his eyes shining with hope. "You're in the hospital," Keanu said quietly. "Everything's okay. You're safe." The woman was silent for a long time, collecting her thoughts. Then her eyes widened. She tried to rise sharply, but immediately winced in pain. My son. Where is my son? Her voice broke on the last word. Tommy froze. The woman turned her head sharply and looked at him for the first time. For a second, there was fear and doubt in her gaze. But then recognition. Eyes filled with tears. Lips trembling. Tommy. The boy couldn't stand it. He jumped up, ran to her and hugged her quietly but tightly. Mom. It was an incredibly quiet moment, but the loudest in meaning. The woman hugged her son close, stroking his head, as if she was afraid that if she unclenched her fingers, he would disappear again. I thought I lost you. Her voice trembled. Tommy squeezed her fingers tighter. I'm here, Mom. I'm here. After a while, the woman finally turned her gaze to Keanu. He didn't move, just watched. Her lips trembled. Was it you who saved us? Keanu nodded slowly. The woman looked at him for a long time, as if trying to understand why he did it. Then she smiled, barely noticeable, but sincerely. Thank you. Keanu didn't answer. He just looked at Tommy. He didn't need words. Later, the doctor told Keanu that the woman would need time, but she would pull through. Are you her relative? The nurse asked. Keanu hesitated. Then he shook his head. No. She looked at him with interest. But you saved them? He nodded slowly. Why? Keanu paused, then said, because someone once did the same for me. And that was enough.